Joined here by Republican District Attorney George Brauchler of the 18th Judicial District. Fresh off your decision to abandon your run for governor and run for attorney general, why do you suppose the campaign for governor never took fire?
Well, I disagree that it didn't take fire. I mean, if you look at the team that we put together and what we've accomplished, there's no other campaign that got financial support from every single one of Colorado's 64 counties. We won every straw poll out there, from the Western Conservative Summit to the Arapahoe Tea Party, the Colorado Federation of Republican Women. The only challenge that we had is the one that most have, and that is fundraising. But having said that, in that last fundraising quarter, we still outraised every other Republican in the race. And in the 2 weeks we were in at the same time as Treasurer Stapleton, we outraised him too. This wasn't just about the governor's race. It really was about the opportunity and the obligation to try to protect that attorney general spot.
So I think nobody wants to be somebody's second choice for prom. Why should voters give you your second choice for elected office?
I don't think it's a question of second choice. I think it's a question of best choice given the situation that's unfolded, one that couldn't have been predicted in April when we first launched this, when you and I first sat down. The idea that the incumbent attorney general would vacate this position less than a year before the general election, at a time when the Democrats on the other side had been printing their own money in their garage. I mean, that's how much money they've been raising. It puts us at a serious disadvantage, and there were very few people, I think, that could at this late date step in with a statewide organization that we happen to develop for a different race and use it to try to secure this place.
Do you think that the job of attorney general requires a different temperament or approach than the job of governor?
I think it requires a different skill set, for sure. I think it requires someone who's not only by definition an attorney, but someone who has the ability to bring to bear all of those analytical skills that comes with being either a prosecutor or someone who has been involved in high-level litigation, and a commitment to our Constitution and upholding the rule of law, for sure.
So one of the things that the Attorney General is charged with is protecting the sovereignty of Colorado. Do you see anything that the Trump administration has done that you would push back on as AG?
Yeah, not so much done yet, but certainly talked about doing. When we talk about Amendment 64, I was not in favor of Amendment 64. I was vocal about my opposition, but guess what? 55% of our fellow Coloradans put it in the Constitution. That makes it the law of the land, and as an Attorney General, I would uphold and defend the spirit of that law while trying to protect us from the bad things that flow from it. But what that means is, when Attorney General Sessions or President Trump seek to impose federal law on top of us, a good Attorney General is going to stand up for Colorado and Colorado's Constitution, independent of whether or not they agree with the law, and that's what I do.
What happens if Colorado elects yet another Democratic governor? Say a Governor Polis who takes a dim view of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and decides to have you not vigorously defend it.
Yeah, I think I'd tweet out in all caps, yikes, exclamation point, maybe hashtag yikes. But I think that's another reason to need to have a strong Republican Attorney General there, is to act as a check on this progressive activist approach, I think, to government, and that's what I hope to accomplish.
Let's talk about the idea of activist attorney generals, because I think you can look around the country and fairly say that there are some activist attorney generals out there. On the left, you've got Eric Schneiderman in New York, you've got Bob Ferguson in Washington. Would you not also put conservative attorney general like Scott Pruett when he was in Oklahoma? Is his approach not activist, just activist from a conservative perspective? And how would you approach that aspect of the job?
One, I would distinguish myself from all those by saying I don't think an attorney general should be in the business of legislating by litigating, and I think that's what you see out of them. I do think that an attorney general ought to stand up for the state of Colorado and ought to continue to defend its citizenry from an overreaching federal government, whether that's in the environment, which is what Scott Pruett did, or any other regulatory area. I think an attorney general needs to be willing to go toe-to-toe with the federal government, and I'm that person.
So I can see you drawing distinctions between a Schneiderman in New York or Ferguson in Washington. You would also draw a distinction with what Scott Pruett did in Oklahoma, and that wouldn't necessarily be your approach.
Listen, I'm interested in protecting what makes Colorado great, but I'm also limited in how we do that based on the laws that we impose upon ourselves. I believe in the rule of law. I don't intend to use the Attorney General's position as a place to accomplish that which the legislature could not accomplish. I'm not going to do that.
So you're somebody who has prided yourself on accessibility to the media. Someone who takes a dimmer view of that might say that it is dangerous to get between you and a camera. If elected Attorney General, how would you square that? Clearly, you're somebody who wants to be heard on issues, but you don't want to be an activist. How does that work?
I don't think the two things are either mutually exclusive or combined. Listen, part of being accessible and accountable, especially in 2017, this isn't 1950, right, where everything is print media driven and the big newspapers drive the news of the day. It is more often than not social media, internet, even television. But to be accessible to an elected official isn't just something that I want to do because I think it's neat or it has some positive impact on name ID. I think it is an obligation of anyone that seeks higher office to do that. And when you run into an elected official who refuses to come on camera and answer the tough questions about how they've conducted themselves in their office and the way that they've used their powers, I think that people ought to be skeptical.
Our time is limited. I want to speed through a couple of quick questions here. Is there anything that the current Republican Attorney General, Cynthia Coffman, is doing now that you strenuously disagree with, or would your term as AG essentially be a continuation with some tweaks?
No, there's some things that we have disagreements about. I mean, for instance, I think that this particular Attorney General's office takes a different view of its role in criminal justice. As a state of Colorado, we have said unequivocally that we want criminal justice to be meted out at the level closest to the voters, local elected prosecutors. And I think that sometimes in the past few years we have seen an interest in the Attorney General in growing the footprint into criminal justice where it happens more at the state level. I don't think that's Colorado. I don't think that's consistent with our laws. I think in another area or two, I would take a different approach with how I file amicus briefs or what I would advocate for, specifically when you talk about civil rights. I'm a strong proponent of fighting for civil rights. I'm opposed to discrimination. I grew up in a home where my mom was one of the chief investigators for the Office for Civil Rights. But at the same time, I'm also a guy that believes in the First Amendment, freedom of expression, and religious liberty. And I think this case that's pending before the Supreme Court now is one that we need them to rule upon sooner rather than later and let us know what those guide rails are for how we're going to conduct ourselves as a state. Because right now, it is too controversial, too chaotic.
You're talking about the case of the Christian baker in Lakewood who did not want to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple. How would you treat that case and our involvement in it very specifically?
Yeah, what I want to see is, without weighing in on one side or the other than to defend the law that we have, I want to ask the Supreme Court to weigh in here and give us the answer as to what the issue is and what it is not. I don't think that we're going to see the Supreme Court rule in a way that's so broad that it eviscerates our civil rights protections. I don't want to see that at all. But I do think in very specific, unique cases like this, there is room to create an exception when it comes to faith, when it comes to freedom of expression, religious liberty, and I think this is that case.
Two final yes or no questions. Do you intend to make an endorsement in the Republican primary for governor?
Not until the primary's over. No, I don't.
Is there anybody currently in the race that you could not support if he or she was the candidate?
I don't think so, but I'll tell you what, I leave open the possibility that the rest of this vigorous vetting process may reveal something that, I don't know, we end up saying, I don't think I can support a person like that for this answer or for this reason. I don't see that yet.
Okay. George Brauchler, currently running for Attorney General. Update your scorecards at home, everybody. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.